Prime Minister is calling to the internal consensus in the upcoming period with the internal power in Syria, in particularly the armed factions that invaded easily the strategic cities such as Idlib, Hama, and Homs, in reaching Damascus, aiming to minimize or stopping the bloodshed that Syria witnessed following a decade and a half after the international mobilization. A part of it is linked not to be overwhelmed with the phase after al-Assad regime and to be busy with rebuilding the new Syria. The second consideration is to overcome the bitterness witnessed in the past era and prioritize the Syrian interest above all considerations.
So, sir, what messages did the Syrian Prime Minister aim to convey? You talked about the internal aspect, but what about the messages conveyed to the international audience in his speech? What was he trying to do?
The message aims the Syrian Prime Minister to convey to the international community that he is not belonging to the old regime power, but to the Syrian institutions that require its representation: the army, the police forces, diplomatic institutions, foreign minister services, facilities linked to education, health, and economy. The message, the following message that he wants to convey that the state forces that was in place during the al-Assad regime try to provide their services along with the new regime in serving the Syrian citizens from the first priority. And the third message is to convey an assured message that might be in stability in case that keep everyone to the interests of the National Syrian Authority, not to the interests of each and specific factions.
So, sir, if you could talk also about the Syrian state television. They declared the fall of Bashar al-Assad and his regime. What are the implications of this declaration when it comes from the state TV?
There are challenges that face the upcoming phase in Syria, which is a discrepancy between the most influenced factions. Most of them are religious and some of them are secular, so that's why it is difficult to easily achieve a consensus agreement. And the second challenge that is linked to the dissemination of the arms in the hands of Syrian families and individuals. Therefore, it is a must for the upcoming regime that the arms should be in the hands of the state hands and the law enforcement hands, and this is hard to be in a short term. As the situation is not only generated today, but for decades. And another consideration that there are regional and international parts that have different and contradictory interests. So, therefore, in reaching a consensus is not as easy as some would imagine.
Sir, we talked about the messaging that the Prime Minister tried to convey to the international community, but in your opinion, how might the international community respond to the potential fall of the Syrian regime?
The international community will respond based on several variables. The first one, to have a consensus between the old regime representative and the new representative. To what extent the factions linked to Ahmed Shara or al-Julani compared to the old regime, on top of which the Prime Minister, following al-Julani's statement, as he is running the cabinet until electing a new government and writing a new constitution. And another consideration as to have an stability peacefully without to be in fear of the armed violence. If the guns were silent, it is an assurance indication for the international community and the relevant international and regional power of to reach in a consensus and to exclude the clear disagreement, among which the United States, Russia, Iran, Turkey, and Israel, in addition, in a main Arab countries, on top of which Egypt, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan.
So, sir, what challenges would Syria face when it comes to rebuilding the state institutions after the collapse of the regime?
There are several considerations would hinder the issue of reconstruction in Syria. Firstly, is linked to the situation that might be taken by some countries of not to participating in reconstruction for their own reasons. For instance, in case the new regime uses some manners that would make this power stop doing the reconstruction. And as a part of that, some countries that are collapsed, such as Libya, Yemen, Syria, Sudan, and Gaza and Lebanon, that make the project of reconstructions are distributed through several different entities with this context. And the third consideration, there's a gross cost financially and with respect to individuals that would require a long stage. As the destruction affected Syria, its age is more than 1.5 decades, and that would cost a lot and a great human power. And another consideration, if Russia insisted to have an influence in the countries, some European country might be reluctant to participate in the reconstruction process.
Okay, well, can we discuss the humanitarian situation? How has the humanitarian crisis in Syria worsened due to the political and security challenges that are faced?
It is not clear up till this moment the impact of the humanitarian situations upon the Syrian landscape. It is early to estimate the casualties affected in Syria, and situation might go towards what's happening in Syria on some areas that require humanitarian aid, some areas that would require international support in facing possible extremism and terrorism, and taking into consideration that the situation in Syria isn't that worse than other areas, such as Gaza, Lebanon, and Sudan. And therefore, it is too early to talk about this, the humanitarian situation up till now.